You say we're talking about what are our kids learning about September the 11th? If you were alive for it, and I was, if you were there, certainly you know what you felt that day. You know what you saw with your own eyes. You know who was responsible. So the idea that any of our school kids would get a sanitized version of this is upsetting to me personally. But I thought, with September the 11th just 2 days away, 20th anniversary, can't believe it's been 20 years. I thought it'd be a great time to talk to our next guest. His name is Brian Montgomery. He's a proud Texan, former deputy assistant to the President of the United States at that time, George W. Bush, serving from 2001 through 2003, was with President Bush on September the 11th, 2001. Welcome to the show, Brian. I think that there are a handful of what I would call like iconic memories and photographs from that day. Obviously, the World Trade Center, what happened in New York, and in Shanksville, and the Pentagon, and all those images. But the other one that stands out to me is the photograph that was taken of President Bush getting whispered in his ear about the terrorist attack and the expression on his face. What do you remember?
Well, I can absolutely remember that, and thank you for having me, Jimmy. We were there at Emma Booker Elementary School, and the president, as we were arriving, the first plane had already hit one of the Trade Center towers, and we had to take a phone call with the Vice President, Condoleezza Rice. Of course, he had a classroom of students waiting for him, so he went in there and started doing the event. Meanwhile, the staff were in the room next to him. And during that time, the second plane hit the tower. And Andy Card, who was chief of staff at the time and traveling with us, said, that's it. We're under attack. And that's when he went through the door from the holding room where we were into the classroom and, of course, whispered the words into the president's ear. Second plane has hit the Trade Center. America's under attack.
Wow. And there you are. You're the President of the United States, and I can't even imagine what was going on through President Bush's mind. What happened after that, though? Was he taken away to a safe location?
Well, he finished the event in the classroom, and then we had an auditorium full of press and full of teachers and faculty. So we went back into the holding room. He scribbled out some notes with some help from Ari Fleischer, who's deputy press secretary, and others, and went into the auditorium. Of course, most people there had no idea what was going on 1,000 miles to the north. And so he used that opportunity to make a statement about what had happened. And I remember, looking at the face of the people in the audience, again, most of them had no idea what was going on. And they had the look of horror on their face. But we quickly got out of there, motorcaded back to the airport, got on Air Force One, who we took, even though it was a 747, we took off like it was an F-18, and we're airborne at that point, heading to some other points.
Take me, if you can, through the through the events as they kind of transpired, as the president's getting more information. Where is the information coming from? Who's getting that information? The president's obviously on Air Force One. You can talk to anybody that you need to if you're the president of the United States. So obviously information is coming to him. I'm assuming piecemeal about what's going on in New York because it was just kind of a fluid situation.
Well, absolutely. We have a military aide who's always with the president. He's monitoring that part of what he needs to focus on. We had a person with the NSC, Admiral Deborah Lohr. And, of course, we have interconnectivity with the operators on board Air Force One back to the sit room at the White House. And we were doing an overnight trip. We'd spent the night in Sarasota, Bradenton area after being in Jacksonville the day before. So we had the CIA briefer with us, Mike Morrell, who later went on to be deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency. So we had good sources and good connectivity in terms of secure communication. So we were getting the news that we needed to get at the time.
Knowing the attack was coming from the sky, was there a fighter jet escort around Air Force One? I would assume there was.
There ultimately was, and we were able to dispatch, J-Stars and AWACS eventually. But there was a period of time we did not have a fighter escort. But interestingly enough, the fighter escort that picked us up was I believe it was the 814th or 820th wing out of Ellington Field outside of Houston. F-16s. I recall looking out the window and seeing them and almost being able to wave at the pilots.
Wow. As you remember back over the course of 20 years, the things that pop up as highlights about it. We were talking before you came on, Brian, about wondering out loud, what are our kids these days? What is your 10, 11, 12-year-old who wasn't alive during 9/11? What are they being taught about 9/11? And I get the impression, at least in some circles, that the education is getting sanitized in that the Twin Towers fell, but there's not a lot of information about why they fell, and there's not a lot of information about who is responsible for why they fell or what their cause was, or jihadism or terrorism or the other things that go along with it. Do you have any? Is somebody who was there, lived it right next to the President of the United States? Are you concerned that we are sanitizing an event that we really need to remember?
Well, I appreciate that question, Jimmy. I don't know if the word sanitize is the right one or not. I'll leave that to others. The important thing is that we understand that while the overwhelming number of people on this good earth are good people at heart, unfortunately, we have bad people as well, and who mean us harm. And we have to be ever vigilant, and we have to remember the events of that day. And maybe we don't leave it to the politics discussion that accompanies this with school-age children. I think it's very important to understand that a lot of Americans, citizens of 80 countries, lost their life that day because of an act of terrorism by bad people. And I think there was good that came out of that, bringing the country together, but we can't ever forget that it happened and why it happened.
Yeah, I think you just highlighted the best thing. I mean, there's a silver lining in almost everything. That event may be the last thing that brought that many Americans together. It didn't matter after 9/11 if you were a New Yorker or not a New Yorker, if you were a Democrat or a Republican, if you were a liberal or a conservative. Everybody understood the horror of what happened, and everybody took pride in being an American, and all operating under the same sort of belief system post 9/11. It didn't last for a super long time, but at least for a while, we were all Americans again.
Well, absolutely. And remember, you try to go to the hardware store, you couldn't find an American flag. People had them on the back of their pickup trucks. They had them hanging from bridges, certainly in front of their homes. And for a while, we all stood as one. I mean, I was with the president a couple of weeks later at Yankee Stadium. And who would have thought a Republican president would get a reception like that? When any president in front of Yankee fans, right? But the outpouring, the emotion, it was just overwhelming. When he went out there to throw that pitch, which was a strike, by the way.
Well, I think it seems to me he rehearsed that, didn't he? And because he wanted, I think President Bush understood the importance of standing tall and being strong and projecting strength and leadership at a time like that, especially at a time like that.
Well, absolutely. Look, I hope we never have to go through something like that. And I was, there with him throughout his presidency at the White House, or at least the first 4 years. And, I could tell how it literally changed his playbook as president. We had certainly a strong domestic agenda, education reform, things of that nature. But I think we would all agree 9/11 totally changed the focus of that administration, from standing up a new department, Homeland Security, TSA, looking at the intel agencies and what went wrong. So it completely changed the direction of the presidency.
Well, it completely changed the direction of the country, and I think TSA, the airports, is a great example. It changed it forever. We are never going back. I mean, we all remember the days, those of us who are around pre-9/11, we all remember the days when you could walk up to the airport, you could walk into the terminal to pick up a passenger, no security, no questions asked, you just did it. And of course, that the airport has been a different place ever since. And there's many other things that have changed, and probably have changed on a permanent basis, don't you think?
Well, absolutely. I mean, just, the focus that we need an agency whose sole focus is protecting the homeland. And bringing all those disparate bureaus, somewhere at Treasury, somewhere at Justice, Coast Guard, depending on what our posture was, bringing them all under one agency and one person made complete sense at the time, still makes sense today. We've had some wonderful secretaries of Homeland Security, and it is a 24/7 job around the world. Can never let up. Have to be vigilant all the time.
For people who I assume people like you who had a role in a day like September the 11th, I'm sure every year the anniversary comes around, there's at least a pause of reflection. What do you do on September the 11th? Do you do something every year to kind of commemorate the anniversary of that event?
Well, those of us who are on the plane, which there weren't that many, White House staff, we tend to, email one another. We'll post something on Facebook. I have a speech that I give actually year-round about that entire week. But I use it just to kind of reflect and look back. And certainly it was sad, but we were all inspired by that day. And, in some ways grateful that, as bad as it was, that it could have been a lot worse. For example, Flight 93, had made it to its course. The heroism of the people on that plane, just words can't describe.
I agree. Brian Montgomery, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate it so much, sir.
Thank you.
You bet. Brian Montgomery, former Deputy Assistant to the President, President George W. Bush, with the President on September the 11th, 2001. All right, quick break.